makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
I've made a number of videos now on left-wing anti-vaxxers like Max Blumenthal and Jimmy Dore, and I want to make another one so it's absolutely clear how the left, or rather this fringe left, the dumb left, is framing the arguments against vaccines, which is a different framing than the way the right uses it. So the right, basically, their anti-vax ideology is shaped by the idea that it's a very libertarian idea of big government should not be telling me what to do with my body. You know, it's kind of rehashing the abortion argument. So big government shouldn't be telling me what to do with my body. It's all about individual choice. It's my freedom to do whatever I want. That kind of is the logic that they apply. Left anti-vax is slightly different. Left anti-vax isn't so much about freedom and individual choice, but rather it's about mistrust of authorities, mistrust of the establishment. So the argument goes that the vaccines are being produced by Big Pharma. They are immensely profitable for Big Pharma, and government is in cahoots with Big Pharma. So this is all basically a plot to support Big Pharma's profits, and instead we should be looking at alternatives that they're deliberately silencing, like a certain horse dewormer, or well before this, hydroxychloroquine. You know, drugs that are readily available, generic, cheap, etc., and that, according to them, the government wants you to wants to silence the science regarding their effectiveness. Which I should add, there is no science about their effectiveness with COVID. So I think we should all have an open mind to the idea that perhaps they might work to some degree, but let's be honest, there is no data currently available that suggests that medicines like ivermectin are more effective than the vaccine. That's just a fact. Maybe they might be useful as a treatment option. I don't know. Perhaps there is some evidence for this. I have nothing against ivermectin, and I have nothing against researchers studying it as a potential. I know we joke that it's a horse dewormer because that's kind of its main use in Western countries, but it is an antiparasitic drug that is very effective in treating certain diseases. And so it's not inconceivable that it could work as a treatment, or as a complementary treatment. So I'm open to all of this. But let's be honest, it is not a substitute for the vaccine. Okay? Now, let's watch one of these arguments in action. Let's see how someone from the dumb left uses these arguments to promote anti-vax ideas, sort of hidden. You have to read between the lines. They'll never openly say it because the left uses their anti-vax arguments sort of in the same way that the alt-right kind of hides their racism in they don't openly say they're racist. They just say, oh, we're just race realists. We just want a conversation about race and IQ in the marketplace of ideas, and we shouldn't have dissenting voices challenged. That's kind of the arguments that the alt-right uses to hide their racism, and the left does the same with their anti-vax arguments. So they won't go out and say that they're against vaccines. They will simply plant enough doubts in your mind so that you choose not to take it. So let's watch Kim Iversen, who is another one of these dumb anti-establishment, anti-war leftists who, for inexplicable reasons, now has a much wider audience because she's now a recurrent co-host of The Hills Rising. Why on earth they hired her, I don't know. And curiously, she often hosts alongside Ryan Grimm. So she's de facto taking the right-wing position because that show supposedly is a left-wing populist and a right-wing populist. Ryan Grimm is obviously a left-winger. And so it's kind of strange that this person who presents herself as an anti-establishment, anti-war voice is so happy taking up the right-wing talking points. But this video, she goes unchallenged, which is really problematic. Anyway, let's watch this. I'm going to speed it up a bit because I don't want this video to drag on more than it should, and this introduction is already longer than it should be. So let's watch.
A bombshell study released last week shows those previously infected with SARS-CoV-2 have natural immunity that offers 13 times more protection against the Delta variant than vaccination alone.
Okay, first thing I'm going to point out, note that there's a section here that is conveniently hidden by this other bit. I'm going to read this section after a while because it is important.
The findings are from Tel Aviv. They followed over 700,000 people that were broken up into 3 different groups. Those who were vaccinated with 2 doses of Pfizer, those who had recovered from a previous infection, and those who had recovered and received only 1 dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Now, the study found that those who had recovered from COVID were 13 times less likely to end up reinfected, concluding that natural immunity confers longer lasting and stronger protection against infection, symptomatic disease, and hospitalization. Now, though the researchers did see some increased benefit for those previously infected who also received 1 dose of the Pfizer vaccine, the researchers concluded the difference was statistically insignificant. So why would those who have natural immunity have a more robust immune response? The researchers hypothesize that it's because of B and T cell memory and the fact people who recovered from the virus are exposed to the entire virus, not just the spike protein the vaccines expose the body to. The study has yet to be peer-reviewed, but the findings are consistent with other studies and public health data.
So that is the important bit. The study has not been peer-reviewed. And I said I was going to show you what was that hidden bit. This article is a preprint and has not been peer-reviewed. It reports new medical research that has yet to be evaluated and so should not be used to guide clinical practice. This is incredibly important. Preprint articles are very important in a situation like COVID because it allows as much data to be released to the public so that then other studies can base themselves on what the info that these studies produce. And then we can make actual peer-reviewed studies, more robust studies that can then be used to guide public policy and clinical practice. So I don't want to imply in any way that this is like a BS article. No, it's not. These are all very essential articles, but they should not be taken as like the last word on this. We should not be making public policy on the basis of a non-peer-reviewed article. But that is exactly what Kim Iversen is going to do for the rest of this video. Let's keep watching.
In July, the Israeli Health Ministry released data showing that of the nearly 850,000 Israelis known to have recovered from the virus, there were only 72 instances of reinfection, showing those with natural immunity were 6.5 times less likely to be affected by the Delta variant than those who were fully vaccinated. In May, the World Health Organization found that the immune systems of more than 95% of people who recovered from COVID-19 had durable memories of the virus that remained fairly stable over time, only declining modestly at 6 to 8 months after infection. Also, 6 studies, which encompass nearly 1 million people from Qatar to Denmark to the U.S. Marines, all found that the range of reduction of reinfection from COVID-19 was between 82% to 95% and found that naturally induced immunity resulted in extremely low rates of hospitalization and death in the event of repeat infection. Now, in the beginning, I said this was a bombshell study, but the reality is this shouldn't have been a bombshell at all. Conventional science has always held that previous infection results in robust immunity against reinfection from various viruses. However, for some strange politicized reason...
Okay. Here's the first step towards a conspiracy theory. The science is politicized. Ironically, it's people like her who politicize the science, and then they complain that just because what they're saying goes against what the science that the government accepts, then that means the government is politicizing, not her.
For the past year and a half, this scientific fact has been hotly debated here in the U.S., but it wasn't always. In the instance of chickenpox, the CDC recommends vaccination for those who haven't had a previous infection. On their website, under the heading, "Who needs a chickenpox vaccine?" the CDC says, quote, "People 13 years of age and older who have never had chickenpox or received chickenpox vaccine should get 2 doses at least 28 days apart," unquote. Same thing for the measles and even polio if they are not combined with other vaccines. Even during the smallpox outbreak, when vaccines became mandated, the certificate of immunity clearly gives clearance for those who had previously recovered from smallpox. So what's the difference now?
Well, the big difference now is that coronavirus is nothing like the chickenpox. It's nothing like smallpox. It's nothing like the measles or polio. It's a virus that has completely different characteristics and creates a much different immune response. The coronavirus is much more similar to the flu. And I will remind Kim Iversen that the reason that flu vaccines are not particularly effective, as much as we'd want with the flu, is because the flu mutates and our body doesn't react as well. Our immune system doesn't remember the flu in the long run. All these other diseases like chickenpox, smallpox, polio, you get them once. You either get the vaccine and it serves you for life, or you catch it once and that's it. Your immune system remembers it for the rest of your life. But there is no evidence that that is the case with the coronavirus, which, like I said, is much more similar to the flu, which your body does not remember very well. I mean, you're lucky if you don't get the flu in the next 6 months, but can you get the flu more than once a year? Of course you can, especially given how many different variants are usually out there. So there is, I repeat, no evidence that your body will, that your immune system will remember a coronavirus infection in the long run. There is no information on this.
Why suddenly, after over 100 years of recognizing previous infection as a robust form of immunity, are we suddenly rejecting science by forcing vaccines?
No one is rejecting science, Kim. You're the one who's rejecting science because you are making a false equivalence with viruses that have no similarity whatsoever with the coronavirus.
On absolutely everyone. Are public health officials just caving to the demands of a frightened public? Are they caving to the desires of greedy Big Pharma?
See, there we go. The conspiracy theory, greedy pharma. Greedy pharma is going to want you to have a booster shot every year or so. This has, again, making you doubt actual science. That might lead to the conclusion that we might need booster shots, which is very likely. It is very likely that we will have to have another shot next year. In fact, many countries have now authorized a third booster shot for a very small segment of the most vulnerable populations, and that is probably warranted. This is not on the basis of greedy Big Pharma profits. You know, the fact that yes, Big Pharma exists and produces these vaccines is a thing. Will you argue that Big Auto is responsible for making you have a car so you can escape a tornado? I mean, this is all just trying to invent a conspiracy theory or something where that conspiracy theory that may exist in other respects. Yes, Big Pharma exists. Yes, it's a massive lobbying. Yes, they do a lot of bad things. But that is completely independent of the fact that we need vaccines to effectively control this pandemic.
In the European Union, where some countries have implemented vaccine passports, people can obtain one by either showing proof of vaccination, testing negative for the virus within 72 hours, or through proof of recovery from previous infection. This is based on sound science. So what is it that is causing the sudden rejection of widely accepted science here in the United States? We currently have college.
Well, for the record, I do agree with her on this point that if you're having to start using vaccine passports or something of the like, I do think that a recent infection in the last month or two, maybe 3, would justify getting one. I mean, I completely agree with that.
Corporations, big tech, politicians, and U.S. public health officials all openly excluding natural immunity as a basis for medical exemption. When recovered, patients raise an eyebrow over policies mandated they be vaccinated. Their educations, their livelihoods, and their ability to participate in society are threatened. Take, for example, Gianna Norris, a fiscal officer at Michigan State University. She recovered from COVID-19 late last year and has naturally acquired immunity. Now, even though she recently received 2 antibody tests that demonstrate her robust immunity from reinfection, the university is threatening disciplinary action and termination if she does not comply with the school's mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy. Now, she's currently suing. At George Mason University, professor of law Todd Zawicki had fully recovered from COVID-19, but was also being threatened with termination if he did not comply with mandatory vaccination. Zawicki produced a statement from his own immunologist who advised that it was medically unnecessary for him to get a vaccine based on the fact he had acquired natural immunity. Only after the professor filed a lawsuit did GMU finally come around to the science they have long previously accepted for other viruses. Then there are guys like Trump, Rand Paul, and Thomas Massie, whom after infection have claimed to be immune from COVID-19. Nonetheless, Twitter labeled Trump's claim to be in violation of their community guidelines and misleading.
Yeah, because that was in October. Trump got sick in October when we had no science on whether natural immunity was actually effective. When we didn't know that perhaps this coronavirus was even closer to the flu. And like I said, the flu's not going to protect you more than a couple of months after you catch it. We didn't know that in October. So yes, that was based on the fact that we had no science. He had no scientific backing to say with any sort of factual accuracy that he had natural immunity to it. And again, Kim Iversen is basing this idea on viruses that have nothing similar to coronavirus in terms of how our immune system responds to them. Nothing at all. So she is lying. She is misleading. And again, don't take what comes out of her mouth as what she's really intending to say. Read between the lines. All of this entire 8-minute video exists for you to doubt vaccines. That's the purpose of it.
CNN, giving backing to Twitter's claim, pointed to the CDC stance that there's no evidence people are immune to COVID if they've been reinfected. Again, completely antithetical to all previously known science regarding immunity, and even antithetical to their own stances listed on other areas of their website. Now, the study also brings into full focus a huge ethical question regarding our demand for mass vaccination of everyone, no matter their previous infection status. Should we be wasting vaccines on people who have stronger immunity than the vaccines alone can provide them when so many vulnerable people in the world haven't had a chance at a single dose? Why should greedy, rich Americans take 2 or even 3 unnecessary doses when poor countries...
So this is insane. She just said, okay, let's assume that the science on the need for a third booster is still out there. We don't really know. She just said a second dose, as if a second dose wasn't necessary. We all know that a second dose, like there's plenty of studies that have shown how to reach that like near 100% effectiveness against preventing death from coronavirus. You need that second dose. The first dose isn't going to cut it. We know this. This is science. She's literally going against actual science by making that statement. It's unbelievable that then you can believe everything else that she just said after hearing a statement like this. Unbelievable.
Countries aren't able to get enough for even their elderly population. Now, as we race towards 70 to 80% double and triple vaccinated in this country, most of the countries in Africa haven't been able to vaccinate even 2% of their total population. Now, if the entire point of the mass vaccination campaign is to get upwards of 70% of the population immune in order to stop variants from forming, then why are we not rushing to send extra vaccines to the very countries where the variants are emerging from? Places like India, where the Delta variant is thought to have originated, has only about 35% vaccinated. Peru, where the vaccine-resistant Lambda variant dominates, has about 30% vaccinated. South Africa has around 15%. Colombia is sitting at less than 45%. All of these percentages are just for one dose. Looking at full vaccination rates, and the percentages are much lower. Now, the CDC estimates that over a third of all Americans have recovered from COVID. A third. That means if the vaccines can even help us reach herd immunity, we only need 50% vaccinated to get us to a combined 80%. Now, currently, the U.S. is reporting just over 55% fully vaccinated, but it would be interesting to know how many of those were previously infected in order to give us a true picture of how close we are to this believed threshold for herd immunity.
Wait, she says you only need about 50% vaccinated, but then she's showing you that the US already exceeds that, and we clearly don't have herd immunity yet. Why is that? Because Delta is so much more transmissible than previous variants that you probably need a much higher threshold of 70% to get herd immunity. And we know for a fact that Delta, getting the vaccine will protect you from dying and probably from ending up with severe disease from Delta. But Delta manages to, the vaccine doesn't protect you from catching it. It does to some degree. It's better than not being vaccinated, something that she's not mentioning it. But still, it lets a lot of Delta slip through the cracks. So, I mean, we might not be able to deal with Delta unless we have different vaccines that are more effective to prevent actual, not just a severe disease, but contagion itself, or some other type of prophylactic, not ivermectin, obviously. So I don't know why she's, what is she trying to do with this? Where's this argument going?
This would be important data for us to know in order for us to find out if herd immunity is even possible with this virus. Now, luckily, countries like Israel are keeping impeccable records. They have not politicized the virus, and they're able to give better insights into what's working and what isn't.
They're not politicizing the virus. I mean, maybe they just don't have freaking anti-vax clowns like you, Kim, uh, who are politicizing the virus like you do on a regular basis.
Perhaps this recent study showing natural immunity to be the best protection will be the thing that finally changes our current line of thinking back to where it always has been.
Our current line of thinking is get the vaccine, get the vaccine, get the vaccine. There's still no evidence that there is a superior line of thinking than that. So the only thing that she can be possibly questioning in this video is to have the vaccine in the first place, which is why I'm arguing this is essentially an anti-vax video, disguised as merely questioning the interests behind vaccination.
Now, no one is advocating for people to go out and purposefully catch the virus, but the reality is millions of people already have, and we can expect that many more will. And the people who have recovered have robust immunity that should be accepted, even studied by our society, as it always has, rather than shunned.
We don't know for how long. I mean, are you going to compare someone who caught COVID in March of 2020 and categorically say that that person has immunity now and therefore should not be required to get a vaccine? You got to be kidding me. But that's what she's implying. Now, what else do we know about vaccines? What are the studies that she's not showing? So here's one from Public Health England, recent one from 23 July. And they have a section on reinfections. So it said there were, of the 83,197 people who tested positive in the 11-week period that this study covered, 980 were possible reinfections. So that's the good news, that reinfection is quite low. But here's the thing. The adjusted odds ratio of reinfection with the Delta variant was 1.46 compared to the Alpha variant. So Delta raises the likelihood of reinfection by 46%, admittedly from a low base. We have to take that into account. So it's not as scary as 46% might look. But here's the thing. The risk of reinfection was not elevated for Delta if the primary infection was less than 180 days. That makes sense. But was higher for those with a prior infection over 180 days earlier. So it rose to 2.37 times higher in people who had a prior infection over half a year earlier. So this is consistent that our immunity to COVID wanes over time. And so we can't categorically say that people who had been infected earlier in the pandemic are no longer vulnerable to it, which is kind of what she's implying. And she's wrong about this. Now, there's been other studies that show that reinfection is less likely when you've been vaccinated. So, among Kentucky residents infected with SARS-CoV-2, vaccination status of those reinfected during May-June 2021 was compared with that of residents who were not reinfected. In this case control study, being unvaccinated was associated with 2.34 times the odds of reinfection compared to the fully vaccinated. So, it's better to have gotten the vaccine, even if you've had a previous reinfection. So you can see that the science is not concluded on this. It has not made a definitive statement on this. There are contradictory studies that show this and that show that. So we should be concerned with setting public policy based on what we know and making reasonable assumptions about what we don't know. And what Kim Iversen is arguing is basically that we should take this preprint study that hasn't been peer-reviewed and guide public policy on that basis. That's what she's basically arguing. And let's not kid ourselves. Like, if you're still skeptical about her, if you're just willing, like a lot of the people on the alt-right just wanna take whatever these people say word for word. They don't want to read between the lines. They don't want to admit that there's a hidden intent in what they say. Here's Kim Iversen. Here's her Twitter profile. Here she's having a bit of a meltdown yesterday because There was an NBC report that basically said Joe Rogan took a horse drug, and she goes on this meltdown. Wait, no, this is blatantly false. It's not a horse. It's not a horse. It's not a horse drug. It's made for humans. What is the intention of this? Does she really care about truth? Is she making such a pedantic case on this? No, she wants to legitimize ivermectin use. Why do I know this? Because she's made freaking videos on this. Rand Paul says hatred for Trump is stopping ivermectin research. Video not on YouTube for obvious reasons. So she posted this on Locals, which is, I think, the Dave Rubin site. You know, free speech. Jesus Christ, like, how can you not think that she's anti-vax? Yeah, this is crazy. Just look at her profile. Again, you know, doubting anything that is, you know, drama related to the FDA or CDC. She's gonna retweet it. Yeah, that's the summary of that same article. Retweeting Rand Paul. Can you call yourself a leftist when you're retweeting freaking Rand Paul? Yeah. This is if California is a vaccine mandate, I'm moving. Vaccines do not stop or even really slow spread. There is zero science behind these mandates. This is a big pharma dollars buying off every level of government. Get money out of politics. You gotta be kidding me that you don't think that this person is anti-vax. We should stop calling these vaccines what they actually are. Prophylactic passports are what people are done. Unbelievable. So what I found also most disturbing, now I don't watch the whole show. I don't watch Rising on a regular basis. I see some of their clips if they're interesting, but I don't watch the whole show. I find it absolutely disgusting that she received no response whatsoever. I don't know if she was hosting alone that day, but there was no one else on the show that challenged her or like made her. This would be great if I was on that show. I would say, hey Kim, all this is, you know, fine and dandy, but can you openly say that you recommend people who have not had a previous infection to get the vaccine? Yes or no? And she would probably she would bend over backwards to not say yes, because she's a fucking anti-vaxxer. That's a fact. And so I don't know if Ryan Grimm was on holiday that day. I think if he was there, he probably would have challenged her in some way, or added some additional bits of information to make it sure that this was not an anti-vax video. But it was. That was essentially an anti-vax video. So again, the purpose of this video is to show you how anti-vax ideas operate on the dumb left. Very different from how they operate on the right. Very different from the pre-COVID anti-vaxxers. So it's different. This one is framed on anti-establishment. When you're anti-establishment merely for the sake of being anti-establishment, then even establishment science becomes suspect. When everything you argue against is everything the mainstream media says, then if the mainstream media quotes science, then they will also be suspect. That is how this framing works. That is why all these people who have become anti-vaxxers on the left are people who began with, you know, just watching channels like the Gray Zone, for example, that is just anti-war, just anti-establishment, watching Jimmy Dore, watching Kim Iversen, watching all these people who basically don't have any nuance at all and just want you to challenge the establishment for the sake of doing so. And after enough of this, then, like I said, even the science becomes suspect. So don't buy into this. This is an anti-vax video in everything but name. And I hope you like this video. If you do, please like, please share. Most importantly, please subscribe. and see you next time.